Is inflation over? And when will prices fall? It is likely the case that prices will never fall in our economy below their current level, and they will only continue to increase in the future. The spike in inflation and price growth we've seen over the past couple of years has caused a lot of economic pain for American households. But unfortunately, the answer is not going to come from lowering prices. The answer has to come from raising wages. Prices and wages are two sides of the same coin. I'm going to talk a little about prices, and then I'm going to talk about wages, and then I'm going to talk about prices again. First, prices. If prices on average in our economy decline, this is referred to as deflation. Any like one good or service might go on sale, might decline. There could even be certain classes of goods that fall in price, like household electronics tends to be a poster child of prices falling over time. Like the first CD player cost hundreds of dollars in the 80s, and it was, a fraction of that, today. But the overall price across all of the goods you buy, across all of the services you pay for, we don't want that to decline because deflation is absolutely a harbinger of economic catastrophe. Over the past 75 years, there have only been a handful of months in which the US experienced deflation, and all of them were during acute economic crises. The longest period of deflation was during the 2008 financial crisis. When the bubble burst and the economy went into free fall, prices fell then as well. The reason why deflation is so scary is because it's an accelerant of economic decline. If prices fall, consumers wait to purchase goods because they're anticipating that prices will fall again. Prices do fall again, but consumers continue to wait. And as people wait and prices fall, businesses fail, people lose their jobs, and then they cut back spending every more. And this is an absolutely vicious and reinforcing cycle of the pullback of economic activity. Deflation almost, is a strong predictor of depression, which is why we try to avoid it at all cost. So now wages. If deflation and falling prices aren't the answer to what we've been experiencing the past few years, the answer, instead is wage growth. On average, especially over long time periods in the US, wages rise faster than prices. Because deflation is so scary, the economic policymakers want a slow and stable rate of price growth that doesn't get so out of hand that it hurts consumers, but isn't so low that it could fall into depression, and it's right now around 2%. So that means that the target for wages is to rise at least 2% every year, and on average they do. The problem is that the past 45 years has seen a takeoff in wage inequality, where even if on average they're rising more than 2%, there are many classes of worker and many wage bands in which wages have fallen, in which wages have failed to rise at all, or which they've grown at a very slow pace. And there's also classes of workers who are earning much, much more than the average and whose wages are growing very quickly. Uniform wage growth is not a reasonable goal for our economy. There's lots of things that determine how wages grow. The problem is that for the past 45 years, there's been a consistent winner in the labor market. The fastest wage growth has been seen amongst the highest earners. That pulls up the average behind it and kind of hides in its wake just the sheer number of workers who are not doing as well. So when we think about the current inflation crisis that we've, for the most part have beaten back, prices were growing close to 9%. Now they're back down to 3%, getting really close to that 2% goal that policymakers have. The answer to that is not to reduce prices, but to make wages rise faster. We want to see sustained wage growth across the wage distribution. And I think that what makes this period of inflation so salient in American households and so, causes so much anger and dissatisfaction is that it shines a spotlight on wage inequality, on which workers have been left behind and whose wages have failed to grow. And that is the problem. Prices going up and down is a feature of our economy. They mainly go up. They went up a lot, but wages failing to grow, that is a systemic and institutional failure to help American households. And that has got to be the target of policy. That is what we have learned from this inflation crisis. We've learned less about prices and learned so much more about wages. But then I said I was going to go back to prices again. So It's worth noting that some prices in the economy are the function of market failures. And that's the other, I think, interaction that's happening here is that there are so many markets that are not efficient, that are monopolistic, that are overpriced or insufficiently supplied. And I think those market failures are also hitting American households. Probably one of the biggest is housing. Another one that I talk about a lot is childcare. There's definitely things like prescription drugs or almost anything involved with health. Um, I don't mean to say that flippantly, only to say that prices are going up because of things in the economy. Wages need to go up faster, but that's not to say there aren't problems with specific prices whose high level is the result of market failure and not just inflation. So that was a lot. This is this is another longer video than I meant to say, but I can't stress enough, and I can admit that when you're a hammer, the whole world's a nail. But when you're a labor economist, every story comes down to wages. And even inflation is still clearly so much about wages. Wages for wages for so many Americans who have failed to grow, who have failed to grow fast enough, and who aren't enough to make ends meet for their family.